and welcome again to Black Administrators and Child Welfare Black Table Talk, BACW. We are, and I have a special guest here with me today, and I'm excited to present her not only to our audience, but to those individuals as well as organizations who deal with Black children and families, whatever that service providing is. We're going to be talking about finding the need. How do you find the need in community and make things happen in that community and not just talk about it, but to also be about it. And today we have with us Mrs.Anna Hollis Kander. Am I saying Kander correctly? And Anna is president of Amachi Pittsburgh. And Anna, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I am a native Pittsburgher and went to Howard University. I grew up in a great big family, so family has always been core to my values. After I graduated college, I went on to work in pharmaceuticals. Mm-hmm. And when I had taken a break, I was home with my kids and I got involved in some advocacy work related to Darfur and the genocide in Darfur, Sudan. And I remember just getting a newsletter about international humanitarianism. And I was very much interested in that. I thought, oh, when I get back to work, this is what I want to do. I felt like it was very much my calling just to help people in need. And I reached out to my sister-in-law and had asked if she knew anything about that grant because I got the newsletter from her. And she said, well, I don't know about that, but I could use a little bit of help at Amachi. So if you're interested.
It's kind of awkward, but it's interesting. I promise you people, we're going somewhere with this.
So that's how that's how I came to Amachi. But I feel like my life's purpose, a part of my purpose is just really being an advocate and a connector for people who don't realize that they have a voice and that they have power. So really like marginalized populations. And this is what interested me about Amachi.
Wow, that's a drastic difference, pharmaceutical sales to just the whole humanity, opposite end of the spectrum. What was that transition like?
It was, I think after being in pharmaceuticals for about 11 years, and feeling towards the end that I was sort of out of place, like not really doing what I was on this earth to do. And so I just felt like I was not in sync with my purpose. And so making the transition was actually, it gave me life. I mean, it gave me energy and it felt very fulfilling. It felt familiar. It felt like home. It felt like, my calling, what I'm supposed to be doing.
That sounds like passion and purpose. That's wonderful. A lot of people don't know how to define the transition from coming from the secular for-profit and just getting into a heartfelt situation. Well, can you tell us a little bit about the story behind Amachi Pittsburgh? And once you got into it, from your perspective, what are you all doing now and what does that look like?
Yeah. So Amachi Pittsburgh before Amachi Pittsburgh was established in 2003, the Amachi National Model, which is a mentoring model, very similar to Big Brothers, Big Sisters, except there's a particular focus on children who have incarcerated parents and faith-based connections, leveraging resources in faith-based communities. So that model was developed, I think, around 2000 and launched in Philadelphia. And then federal funding became available for organizations to adopt the model nationally. So Amachi was one of 300 implementations. Amachi Pittsburgh was one of 300 implementations of the model. And it was implemented here by the Pittsburgh Leadership Foundation in 2003. And I actually started as a mentor and then, joined the organization that next year in 2005.
That's wonderful. So was Amachi, I do know a lot about Amachi. However, when you became the president or executive director of the organization, what were some of the primary needs that you feel like were present in your community versus what it is now?
Yeah. So when the organization officially launched, it was launched as a mentoring program. Okay. And so the whole goal was to recruit mentors from churches right in communities where the kids lived. And then that way you got that child and family connected to that faith-based community where there were additional resources that would support them. So when I started and took over the leadership, I recognized immediately that you serving kids like in isolation was just not effective, as effective as it could be. And like with the power of mentoring and all that mentoring has to offer, I just really felt like we needed to go back actually to the original Amachi proposal, Amachi Pittsburgh proposal, which did plan for family support and resources that they would need. So even though the federal funding didn't support that component of the work, I realized it was really critical. And so I just sort of made it my a priority to explore what it would look like to flesh out our mentoring model to incorporate a more holistic approach, family services, family support. And then we developed another program a few years later, which I can tell you about if you want me to expound.
Yes, that sounds exciting.
All right, so we did flesh out with family support groups and just workshops and really understanding what the parents needed, because it was nice that the mentor would pick up that kid once a week, take that kid out, they would have good times. They had some skill building opportunities, all kinds of things a mentor and mentee would do. But then they drop that kid back off into that stressful environment in a home where parents were struggling. And it was almost as if no one was paying attention to what was happening in that home, in that community, and what parents had to deal with. So we realized that the parents mattered just as much as the kid, and if the kid's mentoring experience was going to be successful, we needed to make sure that that family unit and that support system in the neighborhood, even in their schools, could support that relationship. And so a few years in, probably about 2010, I became, between 2003 and 2010, I became more involved in like advocacy and systems work, because I think that was another realization, which was that, it was wonderful that we were able to directly impact the lives of, so many kids. I think we had about 100 matches at that time, and it continued to grow over time. But there were thousands and thousands just in Allegheny County alone who were dealing with parental incarceration and who we weren't able to reach because we just didn't have the resources. We're just one organization. So that sort of led to some systems work. And I think the more that we understood how families become entrapped in the system, the more we realized that we needed to have a seat at decision-making tables, at the policy table, where decisions are made and laws are passed, that impact the lives of our children and our families, but they had no say in it. And so we became more involved in understanding how these policies were working together to perpetuate these systems. And then I realized at that time that, I needed to make space for, the children, the parents, the formerly incarcerated parents, even incarcerated parents, when we had the opportunity to use their own voices and their compelling stories to impact those decisions that were being made. And so we created a program called Amachi Ambassadors, which provides training and tools for those experts with the lived experience to frame their story.
Such a hot word. Such a hot word now, that lived experience thing, but go ahead.
And it helps them gain the knowledge, understanding, tools to share their stories and to frame their stories in a way that will help legislators, policymakers understand how they need to expand their perspective and considerations when creating those policies. So it's almost like, when people, we always talk about people working in silos. So if you're in public safety, your focus is public safety. And, and so your goal might be to implement some really tough policies that will ensure communities are safe, but not necessarily thinking about the ramifications of those policies and unintended consequences on kids and families. And so we've seen that play out so many times, and I could give you so many examples of how that has happened over the years, and how really our kids, just with all the confidence in the world, really challenged those individuals to think very differently and take a different approach.
Wow, pause right there to say that the children had an opportunity to challenge a system or a policy is really huge. And prior, you mentioned, I want to ask you about that, but also I want to mention that you, how did you say this? Trapped in the system. What does that look like? Because, children or prisoners didn't typically have a system written piece. They were health and human service, they were any given family. But did the disparity in race have anything to do with that, based on even your moving forward with your organization?
Oh, 100%. The racial and ethnic disparities are egregious at every point along the continuum of the juvenile justice system and the adult criminal justice system. It's really shocking. And so so when I say entrapped in the system, I'm recognizing how, even before we get to the children that we're serving, if we're thinking about the adults, their parents, and how they landed behind bars, it's like you understand that those community and systemic factors that just sort of render people more vulnerable to the system are just like pervasive. It exists at all levels. It's housing, it's transportation, it's education, it's social services, it's every in every way that people need support and resources and access to become productive, contributing members and thriving members of society. It's like the odds are stacked against people of color, people who live in poverty, people with mental health issues. And it's like when you realize at the county jail that I think it's something like 70 or 80% of people are, low income or living in poverty and are struggling with, substance use issues or mental health issues. And it's like, one, we're incarcerating, we're criminalizing, sort of difficulties and challenges that people face in life. And we also criminalize race. Like when you're looking at children in school, students in school, and zero tolerance policies, where significantly disproportionate percentage of Black children would be suspended or expelled from school than their white counterparts for the same types of infractions, minor infractions, fighting, just any and everything would be classified as, misconduct, disorderly conduct. And so, but it's like when you look at the data that shows that children, Black or white, deal with a lot of the same issues. They have
Pause
this.
there. Pause there. That's huge, because I think what happens is the data confuses people, and it confuses them on the needs within a community, and it becomes a race issue. It becomes even bigger than that. It becomes a policy issue. So with you all addressing now through the Amachi ambassadors more policy types things, what did you do with, how did you switch over to partners that were not just community-based partners, but also were partners that understood how to get it done at
Yeah.
a governmental level, at a
Yeah.
policy change level?
Yep. So, Lisa, my first, the more I learned about what life is like day to day for these
Right.
families, the more I recognize there's so much stacked against them, and they're so like encumbered with
Mhm.
all the stressors that come along with the traumatic experience of
So,
parental incarceration, and all the financial implications. Oh, mental health is so much involved. And so I thought, they're just fighting to survive every day. Like they really don't have a thorough understanding of, just sort of at the macro level of how to navigate these systems. And so my first thought was, somebody does this for a living. Like, we're here on the ground working directly with youth and families, but there are agencies out here that are focused on policy and legislation and things like that. And so my first thought was, we need to partner with them. And by partnering with them, what we could do is bring to them, some of the challenges that we've learned about, and ask that they make those issues a part of their policy or advocacy platforms. So I had gone to several groups, engaged in the work, and I wasn't getting anywhere.
So you had to do a whole mind shift then. You had to do an entire mind shift, because in their minds, they're thinking of a structure for Amachi Pittsburgh. And I'm just specifically thinking about the local partners that you possibly collabed with. They're looking at an old system or a prior use system that may not even be appropriate now based on the new needs and what you're finding in your data concerning it. So you were changing not only systems, but minds and concepts that people have because of what something used to be and how it used to be served, which tends to happen with families, I would say, because families' needs overall change. And I heard you say, but there's general needs of, for family, for, someone, a caretaker, for food, for housing, for education are the basic ones that nobody wanted to tap. I had to stop you there, wanted to tap in. So back to your partners in collaboration. That was good.
Yeah. So really out of frustration, I went to, because I'll tell you, the feedback that I was getting from these partners is that, oh, well, we've, our board has already established priority areas, we'll be working on, this particular campaign or that one. And I said, it doesn't matter whether if you're addressing housing crisis, if you're addressing transportation, it doesn't matter what you're addressing. Children of incarcerated parents and the families are impacted disproportionately, right? And so
Any way you look at it, absolutely. Any way you try to measure it out.
Right. So I finally went to Pittsburgh Foundation, which, is a community foundation that has more flexibility in grant making. And thank God, by that time, Michelle McMurray, who knew Amachi very well and had facilitated some focus groups and helped us to produce our first publication years ago, She was working at Pittsburgh Foundation by that time, and she totally got where, the argument that I was making and the opportunities that we had to impact change. And so I had asked for some support to be able to hire a sort of government relations firm to help us build a campaign so that we could start to tell our story locally and statewide, even nationally, and just see where that would lead to. At the same time, I had learned, the federal Department of Health and Human Services was eliminating this funding program for Amachi and all these organizations nationally. And I thought, oh my God, it was 75% of our budget. I'm like, how are we going to survive? So then I was just really angry about it, because I'm like, nothing changed about the needs of our children and the communities, that they reside in. And in fact, it was being exacerbated. And so I'm like, how is it that you take this funding away? And how are these organizations, how is this issue going to be addressed? And so,
Question, Anna, did they take it away from the Amachi programs or from all mentoring children of prisoners programs across the board?
all mentoring children of prisoners, the federal program. So those 300 organizations that implemented had to figure out how to survive. If Amachi was the only service area. So some organizations who adopted the model did other types of work. So, they figured it out. But here, I was, at the same time that I'm thinking about these policy issues, I'm thinking, okay, this is a real policy issue right here. The fact that there doesn't exist in Pennsylvania a dedicated fund, a line item in the Pennsylvania budget for this population. When you look at the numbers, it was like 200,000 kids, 35,000 kids in Allegheny County who experienced parental incarceration during their childhood. It was 8,500 on any given day, but we learned that there were 35,000 who are impacted during their childhood. And so I started following the numbers, like, who's profiting off of poverty and incarceration? Who cares about this issue? And how are we really going to make sure that this concern does not die? Because when Amachi was established, it's the first time that people were talking about this particular group of young people,
Absolutely.
So it's like, so we're going to do this for what, 7, 8 years and we're done? No, this is, for as long as we're seeing mass incarceration and these racial disparities in the system, we need to be active and present. And so I learned that the state of Pennsylvania, this was years ago, probably, like I said, probably around 2010 or 11, generated at that time about $11 million a year. Now, this is only through state correctional facilities, not counting county jails and not counting federal prisons.
Wow.
State facilities generated $11 million from families of people who were serving time. Telephone
How do they justify that? How is that justified?
Telephone surcharges, all kinds of things. And so I had a great relationship with the Department of Corrections at the time. So I went to Secretary John Wetzel, who was the head, and I said, we need to do something about this. So at the same time, I got funding to hire a government relations firm to help us develop a campaign. We connected with Secretary John Wetzel to say, how can we work together? How can we partner to ensure that at least some portion of those revenues are coming back to community to help kids, to help break that cycle? And so those partnerships with Denny Civic Solutions, that's who we partnered with to help us develop.
This is eating the whole elephant. This is not taking a bite. This is your goodness. Okay, go.
So we partnered with Denny Civic Solutions, and he then got Amachi connected to several state um, boards, the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, so we can learn about what's happening on the inside, so that they could learn about Amachi and the work we do and the families we serve and their needs and how we could connect their resources and even the mandate that PCCD, for an example, has to address racial and ethnic disparities in the justice system, juvenile justice. So we were trying to make those connections between, okay, PCCD, what are your priorities? What are your goals and interests? What are your federal mandates, right? And, John Denny and Denny Civic Solutions, what are your goals for the community? So we were really looking for people who wanted change to happen and finding ways to just sort of strategically weave ourselves into those spaces, right? Because I had to then show, well, then if this is your goal, we make a match for you because our kids actually need what you're trying to achieve.
That was so much right there. That was so much. How long would you say it's taken you to even not only get there, but get
Yeah.
in the door of
Yeah.
policy decisions? Because we deal with child welfare over here at BACW, and a lot of times people don't pay attention to, and I had to speak on this behalf a lot about children of prisoners, how they're not necessarily included in the child welfare, but the needs child welfare system,
Right.
based on our community-based perspectives and even research, as you said, it took a long time for the government to notice and identify this particular targeted population as a real thing. Meanwhile, the numbers were showing that they were filling like complete school districts in one city or per state, with just children of prisoners. I don't know what their new numbers have been lately nationally, but I'm very shocked at the numbers for Pittsburgh, which have grown, and the state of Pennsylvania, which have grown phenomenally.
Right.
How did you get into what was the time span for that process?
So I would say between 2012 and 14, I had a really concentrated focus on moving this forward, developing those partnerships, doing my homework, getting the grants that we needed to support the work. And RK Mellon came on board with a very significant operational grant to help us. And so PACE and Poise Foundation were there on board as well. And so I would say between 2012 and 14 is when we were establishing all these partnerships in a statewide coalition. And then between 14 and 18 was all the work on the ground, just pounding the pavement, meeting with people, telling the stories, testifying at public hearings, organizing public hearings, speaking at conferences, national, local, regional, hitting folks up in every single way we can. Individual visits with legislators. We were just really casting a wide net to spread the word. And also, by doing that, we were planting seeds and getting people thinking about, this population, and also build, I guess, sort of priming the field for the day that we knew legislation would be introduced to dedicate resources for kids with incarcerated parents. So and I'll tell you that if it weren't for Secretary John Wetzel, he's a former secretary now, but if it weren't for him, I'm not sure that we would have had the success as quickly as we did. So when we first began down this pathway, our government relations partners told us, "Oh my gosh, that's a 12-year, project." And I'm like, "We don't have 12
Absolutely.
years, sir."
Right.
So, but if
And
it
many
weren't
people don't live to get to the fifth year, or they're tired and drained with the system,
exactly,
whether it's, the policy end of it or the educational end of it, or whatever that looks like for any, it's the system, it's that trap spot.
that's
That's
right.
why I'm concerned about how long it took you to really endure,
Yeah,
for lack of a better word, to endure that process,
yeah.
with consideration of the families and the children still having needs. Um,
Hmm.
that's
Absolutely.
that's phenomenal. 12 years is not like overnight at
So
all.
he said 12 years. I told him we don't have 12 years. And we didn't want to run the risk of, all these partners that you're building and these advocates sort of that you're, building, then changing positions or being voted out of office and, moving on to other things. Now, I do have to say, Amachi does not lobby. Our campaign was about public education, public awareness,
Make
making
that
people.
plain. Say that one more time, so I'll make sure we rewind and hit it again.
Amachi Pittsburgh does not engage in lobbying. But we were about education. Like, you've heard this a million times. When people know better, they do better. And that was really essentially what we were trying to accomplish. If you really recognize what's happening on the ground with our families, you will make different decisions and better decisions. And so I'll tell you, so between 14 and 18, we really pounded the pavement. By 2018, the legislation, Secretary Wetzel and his team in state government introduced this legislation, and it was passed at the end of 2018. And it's called the First Chance Act, and it establishes the First Chance Trust Fund. And um, that fund is it receives monies from vendors in correctional system who have contracts at a certain level. They contribute to the fund, and then that funding gets distributed to community organizations who are going to get it into the hands of the children who need support. So from 2018, so it was at the end of 2018. So 2019, there was, all the planning and organizing. Where is this going to live? What are the parameters around it? All of that happened. And then, what happened after that? COVID happened. So it was as if we did nothing. But then
Rewind. Yes, totally
yeah.
backwards. It's a rolling backwards, not a stepping backwards.
Right. So we finally came back around to the Department of Corrections, and the state PCCD is where the fund lives, and we were just really trying to understand, okay, when can we expect something like this to be launched? And finally, for the first time last year, the funding became available. So Pittsburgh Public Schools, it's,
Wow.
for students in schools, applied with Amachi as a partner. And we together will be able to distribute
That's amazing.
scholarships to 22 students as a pilot program,
Amazing.
$10,000 each, that they can use for, it's not just for college. It's college if that's the route they choose. It's
Absolutely. That's
entrepreneurship
good.
if that's the route they
That's good.
use. It's any form of higher education and career pursuits post-secondary school. And what's really special about the way we designed it is that, we're targeting kids who are likely to fall through the cracks, right?
Absolutely.
They haven't been the highest performers, and they're
Mhm.
not necessarily headed for college or, have the GPA to, receive a college scholarship. And
Nor have
like,
the support and advocacy for it either. They don't even have the
right,
support for it. So that
that's right.
some of it is not even an option in their mind. So
That's
that's
exactly
amazing.
right.
So you did policy change. I didn't mean to interrupt, but you did policy change and funding in one act.
Oh yeah, it was all
Amazing.
linked
Amazing.
together, you know, because I felt the state had a responsibility
Good
to
for you.
serve, right? To respond.
Right.
And but what's really special about that program is that we can use a portion of it to support the kids and get them ready
Wow.
for post-secondary. So
Mhm.
if they weren't performing academically, or they're struggling, or they're dealing with all the stuff at home because dad is in jail, and mom might be in jail too, and they're with grandma, we can really dig in and see what their challenges are, see what their interests are, and provide the supports for them before they graduate high school, so that they're in a better position to take advantage of those opportunities after graduation. And a lot of times, like our kids, I know I did, you probably did too. It's like, even though they went to great schools and they were smart kids, guess what? We still got them support for SAT prep,
Right.
because, they take it the first
So
line to get.
community-based organization at that.
That's right. That's right. The first time they
Absolutely.
take that test, they have a baseline score, but if they go through that training, they boost that score up, and it can be a
Absolutely.
couple hundred
Absolutely.
points. That
Yes,
makes
for
a
sure.
huge difference. That is not an opportunity that our kids have at their disposal.
Absolutely. Yeah,
They're
this target
struggling.
population doesn't have that level at all of advocacy or support, even awareness. And one thing I love, I just want to throw this in there about Amachi Pittsburgh and the work you're doing now, is it's including a different audience of people that you wouldn't typically see involved in a mentoring prisons of children
Mhm.
arena. They wouldn't be in the audience. They wouldn't focus on this target population before they did it on a larger scale, right? It was
Mhm.
more of the federal big picture, and it dwindled down into a community. But
Right.
what I'm hearing you say today is that you all have kind of reversed the process and gone backwards, back up to the government to remind them of their responsibility due to not just the funding, but the fact that families and children, not just Black, but families and children are suffering everywhere. How did you, can I just ask you this question in here? How did you assess, and how do you assess right now the success of the change since this policy transition, or the
Um,
introduction of this policy?
I have to tell you that um, I think in Allegheny County, and I think even in Pennsylvania, the systems work looks incredibly different than it did when we first started Amachi. And there's so much more collaboration, there's more responsiveness, there's more investment specifically in Black-led organizations, because Black-led organizations experience a lot of the same disparities that the Black families we serve do. We experience it in
That
this
was great.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's in
great
this
distinction.
philanthropic space where we were getting, I mean, like 76% less operational dollars. And,
Mhm.
I mean, just think about our funding base and who
Mhm.
supports this kind of programming. There was a lot. I mean, I think having these conversations and challenging people to really look at systems, there's always that individual choice
Mhm.
that is a factor in a person's trajectory of their lives, but the systems are magnanimous. They're far outweigh an
Wow.
individual choice, and that the ability of that individual to combat sort of all of these barriers,
Mhm.
and stacked against them in their communities. And so, like, the other organizations, like lots of organizations, Gwen's Girls, Alliance for Police Accountability, like I said, the Pittsburgh Foundation, a lot of the foundation community as well were being challenged to sort of broaden their perspective and really understand that, you have the same organizations coming back to you year after year after year, asking for grants and support for the families. Or how much of a difference are we really making on a large scale? Are we moving the needle? And so I would say there are so many initiatives that are specifically focused on addressing racial and ethnic disparities in both the juvenile and adult system in
Yes.
Allegheny County and at the state level. And so I'll tell you that I do give credit to the community-based organizations, a lot of them Black-led, because when you're suffering and you see the family suffering, you have the greatest incentive to be
Absolutely.
out there making noise and to be challenging
Absolutely.
people. So I really give credit to our community for being courageous and having these courageous conversations.
Mhm.
And I really give a lot of credit to our youth and our parents for making a sacrifice and just like reliving that trauma over and over again when they
Wow.
have to tell that story.
Well,
Just
wait
like
a minute.
I'm
Tell
sorry, go
me
ahead.
how you know that's you're all in and I am too. I have so many questions. I could do this all day, but I know you don't have the time. But tell me, how are you engaging those families and individuals? Because one of the issues I know at the beginning of mentoring children of prisoners, programming and funding and structures being set up, one of the greatest issues was the lack of families wanting people to even know that they fit in that
Right.
target population. So their engagement was like pulling out teeth to say, we're here to help you. We're not going to run away from you. We're not going to leave you. We're not just another data or research group that's coming in here, just trying to get some information from you and leave for our own purposes and to get funding and not to funnel it back down to
Right.
the purpose of the funding. So how are you engaging these families or getting them to tell their story? Because that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. So that's what the Amachi Ambassadors Program was designed to do. And before we got there, now you got to realize we were in the communities working with these families for 7 years by that time,
Mhm.
because we launched the Ambassadors Program in 2010. Now it was happening organically. That's sort of when we formalized the program, but it was sort of organically happening up until then. And it really just started with, like, your heart speaks for itself. When it's pure and your intentions are pure, you really truly care, that shows up. So I think like those home visits with our families, like being there, understanding their needs, following up and following through are really key. Because if they open up and tell you this is what they're struggling with, and you say you're there to support, even if it's not the work you do directly, you had better can find out who does provide that service that they need and make sure they get connected. So that's what we were doing over the years, just being present, being consistent, following up, following through. And then
They
I
learn to
think
trust you.
that's right, building that
You
trust.
build trust.
And then
Absolutely.
when you sort of like share the bigger vision, like a lot of times I think providers go in, with, okay, I'm here to deliver this
Mhm.
service. But we made them a part of the organization, like
Right.
our strategic planning, they'd be at the
Mhm.
table,
Yeah.
focus groups. So it's like every
Wow.
time we needed to make a decision, even me thinking this was a great idea to, go down this pathway, I had to sit with them and say, what do you all think about this? What do you think we developed a campaign with the kids at the table. What do you
That's
want
what
to
I'm talking about.
you know,
Yes.
it's really, we made them a part of it. And then you have to show them. And so the follow up part is showing them how, okay, we're making some progress. We
Mhm.
knew that a lot of the kids we were working with in 2010, of course, in 4 years at least, if they started with us in ninth grade, they would be graduated and moving
Mhm.
on. So you have to share those wins along the way. Um, we would feature them, and we started with kids who were you have to sort of connect with people who are fired up enough or just mad enough, right? To say, yes, I want to do something. And so we started with them in lots of intimate settings with kids who were connecting with each other and realizing they weren't alone. It's like, oh, you're going through the same thing. So if you're going to talk, well, I'm feeling a little bit more confident now. So you sort of leverage those ones who are a little more outgoing and help them to, sort of work with their peers to help build their confidence. So that's really how it started. And when the parents started seeing their kids testify, it's like, oh, okay, well,
I guess it is all right. I guess it's okay. It's not that bad after all.
Right.
Tell me this, if you could paint a canvas of everything that you do and what it really means to you, what would that look like? And where, not only where you're going, but all that you have accomplished in your role to maintain the awareness that this target population exists, and meeting needs, addressing needs, and making them a part of it, as you said, bringing them to the table when decisions are made. So that's buy-in, right? So how are you, if you could paint a canvas of that, what would it look like? I know we used to use all types of other things to display what Amachi was, but it was a struggle. So, what does that look like now, based on where you're going, what your ultimate sky and the dream is for?
Yeah, I think for me, what I see is like a light within, right? A light, power, energy within the communities that we serve, within every kid, every parent. Like they all have something. And I think like even that storytelling itself was intended to say, you're not just on the receiving end of services. You are the one who have something very valuable to contribute to people's learning and education, right? And so it's like even that in and of itself was meant to help them connect with that their personal agency to make change happen. And so I would say I see that light within, and I just sort of see those of us who are in this work, whether you're in education, whether you're in government sector, whether you're in community services or child welfare, whatever part of the system, people who care are working in, it's like I see them encircling our families. So it's like we're not here as saviors, of course, and we're just here to facilitate their growth, right, and healing. And so I see just sort of just us holding hands in partnership around the families who are the ones that are central and carrying a light that we all need.
I can see that. I can see that on a shirt. I can see that for sure. So if anyone, our time is up here, and I'm so appreciative for you taking the time to be a part of this this podcast. Tell me, how can individuals as well as organizations join in and be a part? And then I want you to close us out with what's next for Amachi, what's coming up. So how can individuals as well as organizations join in?
Yeah, so we'll go first to our website, which is Amachi, AMACHIPGH.org. We're always recruiting mentors, always recruiting volunteers to help, and also partnerships, community partners who can help sort of advance, the mission. And so that's a place where people can go and sign up. Can also call the office to 412-281-1288. And then, so that's how to get involved. And then on what's next front, so there's a couple of things. We are preparing to launch a mobile outreach initiative, which we purchased a bus. And
Yay.
we're currently having it retrofitted to sort of serve as a meeting space on wheels. So we're going to be taking the work. You talk about that difficulty. I haven't forgotten it. It still is difficult at times, but we're taking it into these marginalized communities where it's difficult for them to get to us, you know, and just setting up shop on our van. We have VR, virtual reality experiences that kids and parents can take as a part of supporting mental health, and lots of all of our programming. Mentoring can happen on the bus. Family strengthening workshops can happen on the bus. So we're going to have that in those communities routinely. So that's called Here for You. Mobile outreach initiative, and we haven't formally announced it yet, so you're getting a sneak peek, I guess. But that'll be soon. And then
Fresh
we have
off the press. Fresh off the press. I'll take it. I'll take it.
and then we have our 20-year anniversary, November 14th.
Woo-woo.
Please save the date on your calendar, Lisa. We need you there, along with Reverend Good, because we're going to be celebrating the people who made Amachi Pittsburgh happen, our partners, our mentors. You know, we call them alumni, you know, the kids who are now adults. I mean, you know,
Yes.
I'm trying to now recruit some of our alumni to come back and mentor.
No,
But
definitely. My mentee is now older than I was when I started mentoring her. And I'm thinking, okay, like somebody's getting old. It's not me, but
yeah,
I'm happy to see that the life of Amachi, the concern is still there. So get those alumni, you know, that's
yeah,
perfect.
yeah.
That's
So
really
November
exciting.
14th. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What's the date? Let's go. Yes.
November 14th, and we'll be at the Circuit Center for our 20th anniversary celebration. So those are two big initiatives we have on the horizon. And also, we just recently became a sanctuary certified organization. So that's the whole trauma base theory and tools that we'll be distributing toolkits in community when we go out and teaching people about, you know, recognizing sanctuary and just continuing the education, because it's not just Amachi's job, you know, educators, healthcare providers. We have a great partnership with UPMC where we teach their residents and their healthcare providers, their nurses, all of them, about how to recognize and how to serve, how to be a protective factor in their space, you know. So yeah, so
wait a minute. This is you don't say much about Sanctuary Saturday, or is it Saturday Sanctuary? I follow it.
Sanctuary Saturdays. Yeah, that's on social media where
Absolutely.
we're teaching, those elements of the sanctuary model.
I love it.
And that's
It's really, I want to say that that's reaching a different, it doesn't say children of prisoners, but it says we understand the need. So I'm glad you threw that in there. I meant to write that in my notes to say, make sure you ask her about the Sanctuary Saturdays, because I see them, I notice them. They cover the whole person. They don't just cover the situation or the issue at hand. It's concern about what concerns the community. And I think it's a great model and piece to put it out there on social platforms that's very, very positive, and it's not always just an announcement of what you're doing next or even what we're doing, but it says a little more than that for whatever your need is. So I read it consistently. I think that's an amazing piece. I am so excited about your 20th for a multiplicity of reasons. And thank you, Anna, so much for your time. We will post on here to our audience all of the contact information for how to reach Anna and Amachi Pittsburgh. We thank you for joining us. Anna, is there anything you want to send us out with?
Well, you know what? You said something that really resonated with me about sanctuary and dealing with the whole person. And it's really, again, we implemented that model because of how we learned from our constituents. And they taught us that our messaging needs to be around their wholeness in their person and not an experience in their lives. So parental incarceration is an experience. It doesn't define who they are. And so we're intentional about not describing them that way when it isn't relevant, you know?
That's great. It's the flipping of the script. It's a different perspective, but it also it's effective. And I think what happens a lot of times when we serve these communities of needs, not only do we lose our relevancy over time because we don't keep up with the need or the change in the need,
Right.
but we miss it for meeting the whole person. So it's exciting to see everything that you are doing. I look forward to looking further into all of the new policies and updates. Thank you again. Thank you, audience. Please, please, please pass the word, share this podcast, and meet us again. Black Table Talk, BACW. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.